Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking about Dario Amodei's essay, Machines of Loving Grace.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
It really is, and I think I think people are going to find it fascinating and maybe a little bit scary.
Yeah, definitely a bit of both.
So Dario Amodei, he's the CEO over at Anthropic, and they're doing some really interesting work in AI.
Yeah, they're one of the leading organizations right now when it comes to AI research.
And in this essay, he kind of lays out his vision for the future and what he calls powerful AI.
Yeah.
So I think that's worth kind of unpacking a little bit. What does he actually mean by powerful AI?
Well, it's interesting because he kind of steps back from this term that we hear a lot, which is AGI, artificial general intelligence.
Right.
And instead of getting caught up in what is or isn't AGI, he focuses more on the capabilities of this future AI.
So it's less about, the philosophy of it and more about what it can actually do.
Exactly. And what he's talking about is essentially an AI that can outperform humans in almost every single field. He talks about this idea of like a country of geniuses all living inside a data center.
A country of geniuses in a data center.
Yeah, millions of these AI instances all working together or independently at superhuman speeds.
So that's a pretty intense vision right there. That's a lot to kind of unpack and think about.
It is. It's a very different way of thinking about AI than I think a lot of people are used to.
So it's not just like, our phones getting a little bit smarter. It's like something totally different.
Yeah, he's talking about a fundamental shift in what's possible.
So he's got this idea of powerful AI,
Mhm.
but then he also kind of rejects these two big ideas that are out there right now in the AI world. One is this idea of the instant singularity, where like overnight everything changes.
Right, the idea that AI just suddenly becomes infinitely intelligent and we wake up in a completely different world.
Right, exactly. And then there's the other side of the spectrum, which is this idea of technological saturation, where like we've kind of hit the limit of what technology can do and things are just going to kind of plateau.
Right, that progress is just going to slow down and there won't be any more big breakthroughs.
But Emity's not buying either of those extremes.
No, he's somewhere in between. He thinks that progress in AI is going to be incredibly fast, but not instantaneous.
So it's more like a really, really steep exponential curve
Yeah.
rather than a straight vertical line.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the most interesting things about his essay is the framework he uses to explain how he sees this progress happening.
Yeah, he talks about this concept of marginal returns to intelligence, which is kind of a mouthful, but I think it's really important for understanding his argument.
Yeah, it's a bit of an economic term, but he applies it to AI in a really fascinating way.
So how does that work? How does economics play into this whole AI future?
Well, basically, he's saying that there are diminishing returns to intelligence,
Okay.
meaning that just making AI smarter and smarter doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be able to solve problems infinitely faster or better.
There are other factors at play.
Exactly. There are all these other limitations that come into play.
So it's not just about raw brain power.
Right. It's like having a super fast computer, but with a really slow internet connection.
Yeah, it's only as good as the weakest link in the chain.
Exactly. And so he breaks down these limiting factors into a few different categories.
Okay, like what?
So one of the big ones is just the speed of the outside world.
The speed of the outside world. What does he mean by that?
Well, he's talking about things like biological processes,
Yeah.
how quickly cells divide or how fast signals travel through the brain.
Okay.
These are things that even the smartest AI can't really speed up.
Right, we're bound by the laws of physics and biology.
Exactly. And then there are limitations in terms of hardware. Even though we're constantly making faster computers, there are still physical limits to how small and how fast we can make transistors.
So even if the AI is capable of thinking a million thoughts a second, if the hardware can't keep up, it doesn't really matter.
Right. And then there's the whole issue of data. AI needs massive amounts of data to learn and improve.
Which is something that we talk about a lot on this show.
Yeah. And Amodei argues that the availability and the quality of data are going to be major factors in determining how quickly AI progresses.
Because garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
If you're feeding the AI bad data, it's not going to be able to do much with it.
Exactly. And then there are limitations that come from the problems themselves. Some problems are just inherently more complex than others.
So it's not just about processing power, it's about the nature of the problem itself.
Right. And then you have limitations imposed by us humans.
Like what kind of limitations?
Well, things like laws, regulations, societal acceptance. These are all things that can either accelerate or hinder AI development.
So it's not just a purely technological question, it's also a social and political one.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you have the fundamental laws of physics themselves. There are certain things that even the most advanced AI will never be able to do simply because they're physically impossible.
Right, like time travel or violating the laws of thermodynamics.
Exactly. So even though Amodei is incredibly optimistic about the potential of AI, he's also very aware of these limitations, and he believes that understanding these limitations is essential for making realistic predictions about the future.
So it's not just about how smart can we make these machines, but also what are the other factors that are going to influence how quickly they develop and what they're ultimately able to do?
Exactly. It's a much more nuanced and complex picture than just saying AI is going to take over the world.
And it's a picture that I think is really important to grapple with because it's not some distant sci-fi future. We're talking about things that could potentially happen in our lifetimes.
Absolutely. I mean, Amodei himself believes that we could see some of these really profound changes within the next few decades.
So let's talk about some of those changes because he lays out some pretty specific predictions about how this powerful AI is going to impact different areas of our lives.
Yeah, he does. And one of the areas where he sees the most potential for transformation is in the fields of biology and medicine.
And this is where it starts to get really mind-blowing.
It does. He believes that we're on the cusp of what he calls the compressed 21st century, where we could see 50 to 100 years worth of progress in biology crammed into the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow. So we're talking about like a massive acceleration of scientific discovery.
Exactly. He thinks that AI is going to revolutionize the way we do biology.
So instead of scientists toiling away in labs for decades to make incremental progress, AI is going to help us make these giant leaps forward.
Exactly. He gives the example of CRISPR, which was a major breakthrough in gene editing.
Right.
But he thinks that AI could help us develop tools and techniques that are even more powerful than CRISPR.
So CRISPR was like the tip of the iceberg, and AI is going to help us uncover this whole vast landscape of possibilities that we never even imagined.
Yeah, he thinks that AI could help us cure almost all infectious diseases, eliminate most cancers, prevent and cure genetic diseases, prevent Alzheimer's disease. The list goes on and on.
It's like a laundry list of all the things that humans have been struggling with for centuries, and he's saying that AI could potentially help us solve them.
And it's not just about curing diseases. He also talks about this idea of biological freedom.
Biological freedom, what does that mean?
Well, he's talking about using AI to give us unprecedented control over our own biology.
So like what kind of control?
Well, for example, he talks about the possibility of using AI to control our weight, alter our appearance, even enhance our reproductive capabilities in ways that are currently unimaginable.
Okay, so now we're really getting into the realm of science fiction.
It does sound like science fiction, but Amodei argues that these are all possibilities that could become reality with the advent of powerful AI.
So it's like we're on the verge of this whole new era of human existence where we have this much greater control over our own bodies and our own health.
And this is where it starts to get really interesting because it raises all sorts of ethical and philosophical questions.
Right, like what are the implications of all this? How do we ensure that these technologies are used responsibly and ethically?
These are questions that we're going to have to grapple with as a society.
And I think that's a big part of what Amodei is trying to do with this essay, is to get people thinking about these issues now, before it's too late.
Yeah, he's trying to start a conversation about the future that we want to create.
And it's a conversation that I think is incredibly important to be having. It's wild to think about, like eradicating diseases that have plagued us for, all of human history.
Yeah, it's like we're on the verge of this whole new chapter.
And it's not just about our physical health, right?
Mm.
Amodei also talks about the potential of AI to revolutionize our understanding of the human mind.
Yeah, this is one of the parts of the essay that I found most fascinating.
Me too, because, we've talked about how AI could, lead to these breakthroughs in biology and medicine, but the brain is like this whole other frontier.
Right, it's like the final frontier of science in a lot of ways.
And Amodei seems to believe that AI could be the key to unlocking its secrets.
Yeah, he does. He thinks that powerful AI could lead to breakthroughs in neuroscience and mental health that are just as profound as the ones he predicts for biology.
So we're talking about like curing things like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia even.
That's exactly what he's suggesting. He thinks that a lot of these mental illnesses that we struggle with today could become a thing of the past.
Wow. That's a bold claim.
It is, but he lays out a pretty compelling case for how it could happen. He outlines 4 main routes of progress.
4 routes. Okay, I'm listening.
So the first one is pretty straightforward. He thinks that just like with biology, AI could dramatically speed up traditional research in neuroscience.
So instead of, scientists spending decades trying to unravel the complexities of the brain, AI could help them make those breakthroughs much faster.
Exactly. Like imagine being able to map the entire human brain in microscopic detail or develop new drugs and therapies that target specific neural pathways involved in mental illness.
It's like we're finally getting the tools to understand and treat the brain with the same precision we're starting to see in other areas of medicine.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that brings us to his second route, which is where things start to get really futuristic.
Okay, so what's route number 2?
Amodei believes that AI could help us develop entirely new ways to interact with the brain.
Interact with the brain. What does that even mean?
Well, think about things like advanced brain-computer interfaces.
Like something straight out of the Matrix.
Yeah, kind of. He's talking about technologies that would allow for two-way communication with individual neurons.
So we could like download information directly into our brains or upload our thoughts and memories?
That's the idea. Or imagine being able to control prosthetic limbs with just your thoughts, or using your brainwaves to interact with computers.
Okay, that's some next level stuff.
And it's not just about these really high-tech interfaces. He also talks about the potential for non-invasive techniques that could be used to modulate brain activity with incredible accuracy.
Non-invasive meaning like we wouldn't need surgery or implants or anything.
Exactly. He talks about things like using light or magnetic fields to stimulate or inhibit specific areas of the brain.
And that could be used to treat mental illness.
Potentially, yeah. He gives the example of transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is already being used to treat some forms of depression, but he thinks that AI could help us refine these techniques and make them much more effective.
So we're talking about like personalized brain stimulation tailored to your specific needs.
Exactly. And because these techniques are non-invasive, they could potentially be used to treat a much wider range of conditions.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine how that could be revolutionary for treating things that are notoriously difficult to manage, like chronic pain addiction, even personality disorders.
Right. It's a whole new frontier of treatment possibilities.
Okay, so we've got Route 1, which is accelerating traditional research, and Route 2, which is developing new ways to interact with the brain. What's route number 3?
So Route 3 focuses on using AI to build sophisticated simulations of the human brain.
Brain simulations.
Yeah, basically like creating a virtual model of the brain that scientists can use to study how it works.
So it's like having a digital brain that you can poke and prod without any ethical concerns.
Yeah. Exactly. And because these simulations are run on computers, you can speed them up, slow them down, run them backwards. You can do all sorts of things that would be impossible to do with a real brain.
So it's like having a virtual laboratory where researchers can experiment with the brain in ways that would be impossible with real patients.
Exactly. And Amodea believes that these simulations could lead to a much deeper understanding of how the brain works and what goes wrong in cases of mental illness.
And that understanding could then lead to new treatments and cures.
Precisely. So that's Route 3. And then we get to Route 4, which I think is particularly interesting because it focuses on the more everyday applications of AI in mental health.
Okay, so what's route number 4?
Amodei called it AI coaches.
AI coaches, like personal trainers, but for our minds.
Yeah, kind of. He's talking about using AI to develop personalized mental health interventions.
So instead of going to see a therapist, you could just talk to an AI.
Well, it's not necessarily about replacing human therapists, but rather using AI as a tool to augment and personalize mental health care.
So it's like having a digital co-pilot on your journey to better mental health.
Exactly. He envisions a future where AI could be used to track your moods, identify triggers, provide personalized coping mechanisms, even deliver therapeutic interventions.
It's like having a 247 therapist in your pocket, but without the stigma that sometimes prevents people from seeking help in the first place.
Absolutely. And he thinks that these AI coaches could be especially beneficial for people who don't have access to traditional mental health care.
Yeah, like in rural areas or developing countries where there's a shortage of therapists.
Exactly. But it's not just about treating mental illness. He also talks about using AI to enhance our cognitive abilities, improve our emotional regulation, and generally just help us live happier, healthier lives.
So it's like AI could become this kind of like mental wellness companion.
Exactly. He envisions a future where AI coaches could help us manage everyday stresses, improve our relationships with others, even enhance our creativity and productivity.
Okay, now that's a future I can get behind.
Right. It's a future where technology is used not just to treat illness, but to actually improve the human experience.
And it's a future that Amadei seems to believe is well within our reach.
He does. He thinks that these advancements in AI could lead to a world with a significantly higher baseline of mental well-being for everyone.
And that's a really powerful and optimistic vision for the future. It's really something, isn't it? This idea that we could be on the verge of, like, fundamentally changing what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And that brings up some really big questions about the future, like what happens to work when AI can do pretty much any job better than we can?
That's a question I think a lot of people are worried about. Like, are we all going to be out of jobs? Is AI going to put us all out of work?
Amadei definitely sees that as a big challenge. He says we really need to start thinking now about what work is going to look like in a future with powerful AI.
Yeah, because it's not like we can just ignore it and hope it goes away, right?
Right. He thinks AI is going to start by changing how we work, making us all way more efficient and productive.
Okay, so like AI assistants that help us do our jobs better.
Exactly. But then, he says, as AI gets even more advanced, we might need to completely rethink work altogether. Like, what even is a job in a world where machines can do almost everything?
Yeah, it's kind of scary, but also kind of exciting, Like, what could we achieve if we didn't have to spend all our time working?
That's exactly the point Amadei is making. He says even if AI can do most jobs better than us, there's still something special about being human.
Okay, so, like, what makes us irreplaceable?
He talks about things like creativity, thinking for yourself, knowing what's right and wrong, dealing with other people's emotions. AI might be catching up, but those are the areas where humans are still ahead, at least for now.
So it's like we need to figure out how to focus on those uniquely human strengths in a future where AI is doing more and more of the heavy lifting.
Exactly. And we might even need to rethink our whole relationship with work. Amadei even suggests things like universal basic income to make sure everyone has enough to live on, even if traditional jobs become less common.
Universal basic income. It's a big idea, but it makes you wonder if that kind of radical change might be necessary in a future where AI is changing everything.
I think that's what Amadei wants us to think about. It's not about just letting AI happen to us. He wants us to be active in shaping this future, to steer it in a direction that's good for everyone.
So, like, we're not just along for the ride. We actually get to, like, grab the wheel and decide where we want to go.
Exactly. It's about having these conversations now, deciding what kind of future we want to create with AI instead of just reacting to whatever happens.
It's a huge responsibility, but it's also incredibly exciting, don't you think?
Yep.
Like, we have the chance to build something amazing here.
I completely agree. And while Amadei is realistic about the risks, he's ultimately hopeful about the potential. He thinks AI could be the key to solving some of the world's biggest problems, if we use it wisely.
It's a powerful reminder that the future isn't set in stone. It's something we build together. And who knows, maybe with a little help from AI, we can actually create a future that's even brighter than we can imagine.
And that's a future worth working towards.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day-to-day, think about the possibilities we discussed. Think about what role you want to play in shaping the future of AI. It's a conversation that needs all of us. Thanks for joining us for this incredible deep dive. We'll see you next time.